Have you ever wondered how a handful of colonies, scattered along the eastern coast of North America, managed to challenge the greatest empire in the world? It sounds almost impossible. On one side stood Great Britain, a global superpower with the strongest navy, experienced soldiers, and vast wealth. On the other side were ordinary farmers, merchants, craftsmen, and families who had no idea that their struggle would change the course of world history forever. This is the story behind America's independence, a story filled with courage, sacrifice, impossible decisions, unexpected heroes, and a dream that inspired millions of people around the world. But this wasn't just a war. It was a battle over a simple yet powerful question: who should have the right to decide how people live? Long before the United States became a nation, the land was home to many Native American civilizations, each with its own traditions, cultures, and ways of life. Then, beginning in the 1600s, European settlers crossed the Atlantic Ocean in search of opportunity, religious freedom, and a better future. Among them were thousands of British settlers who established colonies along the eastern coastline. Over time, these colonies grew into busy communities. Towns expanded into cities, farms produced food for local families and overseas markets, and trade flourished. Ships carried tobacco, timber, rice, and other goods across the Atlantic, creating wealth for both the colonies and Britain. Although the colonies belonged to the British Crown, life in America was different from life in England. The ocean separating them was enormous. Messages took weeks or even months to arrive. Because of this distance, colonial governments often managed many of their own local affairs. People became used to making decisions through local assemblies, electing representatives, and solving problems without constant interference from London. For many years, this arrangement worked well. Most colonists considered themselves loyal British subjects. They celebrated the British King, followed British laws, and proudly called themselves part of the British Empire. Few imagined that one day they would fight against it. Everything began to change after a costly global conflict known as the French and Indian War, which formed part of the larger 7 Years' War. Britain emerged victorious, but victory came with an enormous price. The government had borrowed huge amounts of money to finance the war and suddenly faced a mountain of debt. British leaders believed the American colonies should help pay those costs. After all, they argued, British soldiers had defended the colonies during the conflict. From London's perspective, asking the colonies to contribute seemed reasonable. The colonists saw things very differently. New taxes began appearing one after another. Goods that people used every day became more expensive. Newspapers, legal papers, licenses, and even playing cards were affected by taxes. Merchants worried about their businesses. Farmers feared rising costs. Ordinary families wondered why they were being asked to pay taxes decided by people thousands of miles away. The biggest complaint wasn't simply about money. It was about representation. The colonists had no elected representatives in the British Parliament. They believed that if they had no voice in making the laws, Parliament should not have the authority to tax them. This belief eventually became famous through a simple phrase that echoed across the colonies: no taxation without representation. Those 5 words carried enormous power. They united people from different backgrounds under a common cause. They believed government should listen to the people it governed. While not everyone agreed on every issue, many agreed that fairness required representation. As tensions increased, meetings were held in town squares, churches, and taverns. Newspapers spread political ideas from colony to colony. Pamphlets challenged British policies, and encouraged public debate. For perhaps the first time, many ordinary people became deeply involved in political discussions. One event that especially angered the colonists was the Stamp Act of 1765. This law required official stamps on many printed materials. To British officials, it was another source of revenue. To many colonists, it represented something much larger, a dangerous step toward unlimited government power over their daily lives. Public protests erupted. Crowds gathered in cities. Merchants organized boycotts of British goods. Instead of buying imported products, many families made their own clothing and household items. What began as an economic protest slowly became a movement built on shared determination. Eventually, Britain repealed the Stamp Act, but the relationship between Britain and the colonies had already begun to change. Trust was fading on both sides. British officials believed stronger control was necessary. Many colonists believed greater freedom was essential. As more taxes and regulations followed, frustration continued to grow. Then came another turning point. British soldiers were stationed in several colonial cities, including Boston. Their presence was meant to maintain order, but many residents viewed them as an occupying force. Tension filled the streets. Arguments broke out regularly. Small disagreements quickly became larger confrontations. On a cold evening in March 1770, a crowd gathered around a group of British soldiers in Boston. Angry words were exchanged. Snowballs, some containing ice and debris, were thrown. The situation spiraled out of control. Suddenly, shots rang out. Several colonists were killed. The event became known as the Boston Massacre. Although historians continue to debate every detail of what happened that night, there is no doubt about its political impact. Patriot leaders used the incident to show what they believed was the danger of unchecked British authority. Newspapers published dramatic illustrations and emotional accounts that spread throughout the colonies. The divide grew even wider. Yet many people still hoped reconciliation was possible. Few wanted a full-scale war. Most simply wanted their concerns to be heard. But history often changes through moments that seem small at first. In 1773, Parliament passed the Tea Act. Surprisingly, the law actually lowered the price of tea sold by the British East India Company. However, many colonists believed accepting the tea would also mean accepting Parliament's right to tax them. The issue had become symbolic. It was no longer just about tea, it was about principles. One winter night, a group of colonists disguised themselves and boarded British ships anchored in Boston Harbor. They threw hundreds of chests of tea into the water, rather than allow the cargo to be unloaded. The Boston Tea Party shocked Britain. British leaders saw it as an act of deliberate destruction. The response was swift. London introduced a series of harsh measures intended to punish Massachusetts and restore order. Boston Harbor was closed. Self-government was restricted. British authority increased. Instead of isolating Boston, these actions united many of the colonies. Communities that had once viewed themselves separately began seeing themselves as partners facing the same challenge. Messages of support poured into Massachusetts. Food, supplies, and encouragement arrived from neighboring colonies. For the first time, leaders from different colonies began meeting together to discuss a common response. Without realizing it, they were laying the foundation for something entirely new, a united America. At this stage, independence was still not the goal for everyone. Many hoped the conflict could still be resolved peacefully. Others believed compromise had become impossible. The question hanging over every meeting, every conversation, and every family dinner was becoming harder to ignore. Could the colonies remain loyal to Britain, while protecting what they believed were their rights? Or had the path toward independence already begun? The situation between Britain and the American colonies had reached a dangerous point. Years of disagreement, protests, and failed attempts at compromise had created a deep divide. Many people still hoped peace could be restored, but events were moving quickly toward a conflict that would decide the future of an entire continent. In early 1775, British officials believed they could stop the growing rebellion by taking control of colonial weapons and supplies. In Massachusetts, tensions were especially high. British troops moved toward the towns of Lexington and Concord, where colonial militia members were gathering. On the morning of April 19, 1775, the two sides met on a quiet field in Lexington. No one knows with complete certainty who fired the first shot, but that moment changed history forever. The fighting spread from Lexington to Concord, and by the end of the day, American militia had fought against British soldiers. The American Revolution had begun. At first, the colonial forces were not a professional army. They were farmers, workers, and ordinary citizens who picked up weapons because they believed their rights were being threatened. Many had little military experience. They faced one of the most powerful armies in the world, but they had something that money and training could not easily create: determination. Soon after the battles of Lexington and Concord, representatives from the 13 colonies gathered at the Second Continental Congress in Philadelphia. They needed to make a difficult decision. Should they continue trying to negotiate with Britain, or should they prepare for a larger war? The colonies needed leadership, organization, and a commander who could unite their forces. They chose George Washington, a respected military leader from Virginia, to become the commander of the Continental Army. Washington was not chosen because he had the largest army or the most resources. In fact, the challenges ahead were enormous. The Continental Army lacked weapons, supplies, uniforms, and proper training. Many soldiers had never fought in a major battle before, but Washington had important qualities. He was calm under pressure, determined, and able to inspire people during difficult moments. He understood that winning the war would require patience, discipline, and the ability to keep fighting even when victory seemed impossible. Meanwhile, Britain prepared to crush the rebellion. British leaders believed the conflict would be short because they had experienced soldiers, powerful ships, and greater financial resources. However, they underestimated the strength of the colonial resistance. One of the first major battles took place near Boston at Bunker Hill in June 1775. Although British forces eventually captured the position, they suffered heavy casualties. The battle showed that the colonial army could stand against experienced British troops. It gave the Americans confidence. It also sent a message to Britain. This rebellion would not disappear easily. As the war continued, another important debate was taking place among the colonists. Should they continue fighting for their rights as British citizens, or should they completely separate and create a new nation? For many months, independence was a controversial idea. Some leaders feared breaking away from Britain. They worried about the dangers of creating a new country during wartime. Others believed independence was the only way to protect their freedoms. One man who strongly influenced public opinion was Thomas Paine. In 1776, Paine published a powerful pamphlet called Common Sense. Written in simple language that ordinary people could understand, it argued that the colonies should break away from Britain and build their own future. The pamphlet became extremely popular. Thousands of copies were sold, and it helped convince many people that independence was not only possible but necessary. Slowly, the idea of creating a new nation gained support. On July 4, 1776, the Continental Congress approved the Declaration of Independence. This document announced that the 13 colonies were no longer under British rule. They declared themselves free and independent states. The Declaration contained some of the most famous ideas in American history. It stated that all people had certain natural rights and that governments received their power from the people. The document was written mainly by Thomas Jefferson, with contributions and approval from other members of Congress. It expressed the belief that people had the right to change a government that failed to protect their freedoms. However, declaring independence was only the beginning. Words on paper could create a vision, but a nation had to be defended. The Revolutionary War became a long and difficult struggle. The early years were extremely challenging for the Americans. British forces captured important cities, including New York City. The Continental Army suffered defeats and faced low morale. Many soldiers left the army when their service ended. During the harsh winter of 1777-1778, Washington and his troops stayed at Valley Forge in Pennsylvania. The conditions were terrible. Soldiers faced freezing temperatures, shortages of food, clothing, and medicine. Many suffered from illness. Many lost hope. But Washington and his army refused to give up. The winter at Valley Forge became a symbol of sacrifice and determination. With training and improved organization, the Continental Army became stronger. They were no longer just a group of volunteers. They were becoming a real fighting force. While the war continued on land, America also needed support from other countries. The conflict had become more than a struggle between Britain and its colonies. France, Britain's long-time rival, saw an opportunity. By supporting the American cause, France could weaken British power. In 1778, France officially joined the war on the American side. French money, soldiers, weapons, and naval power became extremely important. This alliance changed the balance of the conflict. The Americans still faced enormous challenges, but now they were not fighting alone. The war moved into new areas, and both sides experienced victories and defeats. Battles took place across the colonies, from the northern states to the southern regions. Soldiers fought not only for territory, but for the future they believed in. For American troops, the struggle was about creating a new country based on their own ideals. For Britain, it was about preserving control over a valuable part of its empire. The conflict became a test of endurance. Could a group of former colonies defeat one of the world's strongest powers? At first, many people thought the answer was impossible. But history has a way of surprising the world. The Americans continued fighting. Their leaders adapted. Their allies provided support. Their determination grew stronger. The final stages of the war would bring dramatic battles, unexpected victories, and a moment that would finally decide whether the United States would survive as an independent nation. The dream of freedom was no longer just an idea. It was becoming a reality. As the American Revolution entered its final years, the world was watching a conflict that many once believed the colonies could never win. The British Empire still had a powerful military, a strong navy, and vast resources. But the Americans had something equally important, the determination to fight for a future they believed in. By this stage of the war, both sides were exhausted. Years of battles had taken a heavy toll. Soldiers had suffered through hunger, cold winters, and painful losses. Families had been separated, communities had been damaged, and the cost of war was felt everywhere. But the American dream of independence continued to grow stronger. One of the most important turning points came in 1781 at the Battle of Yorktown. British General Charles Cornwallis had moved his army to Virginia, hoping to gain control of the southern colonies. However, American and French forces saw an opportunity to trap the British army. George Washington worked together with French military leaders to create a plan. American troops marched south while French naval forces helped block British escape routes by sea. The situation became impossible for Cornwallis, surrounded by American and French forces with limited supplies and no realistic path to victory. The British commander surrendered on October 19, 1781. The victory at Yorktown was a powerful moment. The war was not officially over yet, but the British government realized that continuing the conflict would be extremely difficult and costly. The battle had changed everything. After years of fighting, negotiations began between Britain and the new United States. In 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed. This agreement officially ended the Revolutionary War and recognized the United States of America as an independent nation. A country that had once been only a collection of 13 colonies had successfully challenged one of the greatest empires on earth. It was an extraordinary achievement, but winning independence was only the beginning. The new nation now faced a different challenge: how to build a government. The leaders of America had won a war, but creating a successful country would require wisdom, cooperation, and difficult decisions. At first, the United States operated under a system called the Articles of Confederation. However, this government was weak and struggled to solve many national problems. The country needed a stronger structure that could unite the states while still protecting individual freedoms. In 1787, leaders gathered in Philadelphia to create a new framework for the nation. The result was the United States Constitution. The Constitution established the basic principles of American government. It created separate branches of government, introduced a system of checks and balances, and defined the powers of national leaders. In 1789, George Washington became the first president of the United States. The same man who had led the Continental Army through years of struggle now faced the responsibility of leading a new nation. His presidency helped establish important traditions and showed the world that the United States was serious about building a stable government. The American Revolution had created a new country, but it also created powerful ideas that spread beyond America's borders. The concepts of liberty, representation, and the rights of citizens influenced political movements around the world. People in other countries looked at the American example and questioned traditional systems of power. However, the story of American independence was also complicated. The words of the Declaration of Independence spoke about equality and natural rights. But many people living in America did not experience those freedoms. Enslaved Africans remained in bondage, and Native American communities faced enormous challenges as the new nation expanded. The struggle for freedom did not end in 1776. Instead, it became an ongoing journey. The ideals introduced during the Revolution continued to influence debates about rights, equality, and democracy for generations. The American Revolution remains one of the most important events in modern history because it showed that a determined group of people could challenge a powerful empire and create a new political system. It was not a simple victory. It was built through sacrifice. Thousands of soldiers lost their lives. Families endured hardship. Many people made difficult choices because they believed they were fighting for something greater than themselves. The story of America's independence is ultimately a story about the power of ideas. The idea that people should have a voice in their government, The idea that leaders should be responsible to the people they serve. The idea that a nation can be created around shared principles and hopes for the future. From the first protests against British taxes to the final victory at Yorktown, the American Revolution was a journey filled with uncertainty. Nobody knew exactly how it would end. Nobody knew if the colonies would survive. But through courage, determination, and unity, a new nation was born. Today, the United States is one of the most influential countries in the world, and its history continues to be studied by millions of people. The events of the American Revolution remind us that major changes often begin with ordinary people who believe that something better is possible. The story behind America's independence is not only about battles and political decisions. It is about human ambition, hope, and the desire to shape a better future. Every nation has moments that define its identity. For the United States, the American Revolution was that defining moment. It transformed 13 colonies into a country. It changed the balance of global power, and it created a story that continues to inspire people more than 2 centuries later. If you enjoyed this journey through the story of America's independence, make sure to support the channel, like this video, share it with others who enjoy history, and subscribe for more fascinating stories from the past. Because history is not just about what happened yesterday. History is about understanding the choices, struggles, and dreams that shape the world we live in today. Thank you for watching.